The Dell S's are basically Dell's new mid-range laptops. You can think of them as competitors to HP's OmniBooks or Lenovo's Yogas. But Dell are doing something special here. They are continuing in their mission to confuse as many buyers as possible. These used to be called Inspirons, then they were Dell Pluses, and now for some reason Dell S's. And just to add to the confusion, they recently launched a 13-inch Dell XPS, which is from their more premium line, but is actually much cheaper. What a mess. But what we really care about today is, are these Dell S's worth buying? Well, the good news is that they do feel more premium than the OmniBooks. Similar build quality to a Yoga, which is a good thing. They have a comfortable keyboard, I'm glad to say, better than the other Dells. Those XPSs, they have this low travel keyboard. These laptops, they also have decent trackpads and a good variety of ports. The 16-inch actually has two good display options too. Unfortunately, the other two screens, they kind of suck on the 16, and the 14-inch screens, they're all kind of bad. These Dell S's, they're also heavy for what they are, and they're just not great performers. So overall, this means we only really like the 14-inch if it's below $1,000, as in value for money territory. The 16-inch, on the other hand, we do like, especially when it's on sale. Now, to help you out, on our website, bestlaptop.deals, we specifically highlight if a laptop's current price makes it a good or great deal. This is important, as laptop prices, they're just going up and down like a friggin' yo-yo right now. So, with that said, I'm now going to hand over to Sierra, who's going to walk you through these laptops and really advise you on what configurations are worth buying.
Okay, so let's say you find a good deal on this laptop with the specs you want. Assuming that best case scenario, there are some nice things about the device, namely the chassis. It feels well built. This is a huge improvement over prior Dell Pluses and Inspirons, which felt cheap. This is closer in quality to a Lenovo Yoga. Almost no flex on the keyboard deck and minimal flex on the lid. It also has stiff hinges, which means using the touchscreen doesn't cause it to flop back, not even when you're walking around with it. It does have sharp edges at the front of the chassis, so if you use it on a plane without support for your arms, it could cut into your wrists a bit. As far as looks go, both the 14 and 16-inch look good, stylish and minimal in an understated way. We have the dark blue. It also comes in light blue, but your specs will restrict which color you can get, which is weird. I think it's related to the screen. I personally would prefer the light blue to the one we have here. I have a feeling it would show less fingerprints on the lid because lighter colors generally are better for that. I will say, though, that I like that both colors have darker keys on the keyboard as it contrasts well when the backlight is on, making it easy to read. There also isn't any backlight bleed around the keys, which means you won't be distracted in a dark room. The keyboard is comfortable to type on with 1.3 millimeters of key travel and sufficient spacing between the keys. This makes it noticeably more comfortable to type on when compared to the low-travel keyboards in Dell's more expensive XPS line. The layout is standard with slightly smushed up and down arrow keys, which is very common on modern keyboards because they want to keep the bottom of the keyboard aligned. Also, the keyboard is louder to type on when compared to the Yogas. Overall, the keyboard is a step forward from Dell's XPS line. It's now about middle of the pack, but the Yoga is still ahead. The trackpad is also pretty good. One of the more comfortable mechanical ones I've used, extremely smooth tracking and an accurate click. It's not too loud, and it doesn't press too far down when you click either. The only downside is that it may be a little slippery for some folks, almost too smooth with very little resistance. Now, there are lots of display options on the Dell S's, and they are all over the place. On the 14-inch, all are bad. Yes, the one we have is an OLED, but it's low resolution, only 60 Hz, and is not bright. The other one is brighter, but it has dreadful colors, low resolution, and is an OLED. Seriously, what the heck? Dell's XPS 13 is half the price, and it has a significantly better display than any of these. Bright, high resolution, color accurate with a fast refresh rate, so we know Dell can do it on the cheap. Why did they choose not to here? And they have a higher resolution option on the 14-inch, but it's not available in the US. Very annoying. Anyways, I have good news. The 16-inch is better. There are at least two decent high-resolution panel options. We'd recommend avoiding the full HD ones on the 16 as they also have those awful colors. One of the better ones is a 2560 by 1600 IPS that gets quite bright with good colors. The other one is the one we have, a 2880 by 1800 OLED panel that refreshes up to 120 Hz, has good colors, and is a touchscreen. The two OLED touchscreens we have in do not appear to support pen input, which is less common on traditional laptops rather than two-in-ones. Since they are touchscreens, they do not have the anti-glare coating on the non-touch panels that Dell is offering. These are both quite glossy and reflective in brighter environments. Ports are pretty good on this laptop, and they're the same across the 14 and 16-inch. On the left, we have two Thunderbolt 4 ports also used to charge the laptop, a 5GB USB-A port, and HDMI 2.1. On the right, we have another 5GB USB-A port and a headphone mic combo jack. We would have liked to see a USB-C port to charge the laptop on both sides. An SD card reader might have been nice to have on the 16-inch model too, if you plan to do any photo editing or light video editing. Other than that, this is a decent selection. This laptop can come configured with 4 different chips: an Ultra 5, Ultra 7, Ultra X7, and Ultra 9. The last two, the X7 and 9, offer more performance, while the first two, the 5 and 7, are great for everyday office use. Both ARM models have the Ultra 7 355. Its performance is plenty for the things I do on a daily basis, such as Excel work like pivot tables, and then having lots of tabs open in Chrome for research. Not super snappy like a MacBook, but not slow or laggy either. They never got warm on the keyboard deck for this sort of thing, and their fan noise was inaudible if there was any. Now, let's talk about how these laptops perform if you want to do more than light tasks on them. The Ultra 7 we have is at the lower end of performance in a laptop at this price point. The Ultra 5 will be a bit behind it, as it has the same basic CPU, just running a little slower. The Ultra X7 and 9 give you competitive performance in a laptop this size, as shown in the Acer Swift 16 and OmniBook Ultra, which have similar chips. Just be aware the Dell 14 and 16S don't feed their CPUs as much power as the Swift, 25 watts for the 14 and 35 for the 16. What worries us is even with the lower-end Ultra 7 CPU, the smaller 14-inch Dell S gets very warm under load and runs its fan pretty high. We would expect this to be worse with the more powerful CPUs. The 16-inch is slightly better in terms of heat you feel and fan noise, but still not great. For GPU performance, we'll use Steel Nomad Lite, which runs natively on all laptops. Here you can see that the X7 chip with its Arc B390 GPU can perform a bit better than Snapdragon's newest GPU and Apple's M5 chip. Intel has way better app compatibility for gaming than either of those, and is what we'd recommend if you are getting a laptop like this for gaming, even light gaming. You can see this compatibility issue demonstrated in TimeSpy. The Qualcomm laptops have to run this benchmark through emulation and don't perform well. Plus, TimeSpy doesn't even run on macOS. For creative tasks like Photoshop, which use a mix of CPU and GPU performance, Qualcomm and Apple do much better here. The 8-core chips in the Dells that we have are not usable in tasks like these. You'd want the X7 chip if you plan to do even light creative work. You can see this in the OmniBook Ultra and the Swift. Let's now talk about how well the Dell S's do while unplugged. Performance-wise, they do throttle a bit on battery, which means they don't perform as well. This is disappointing considering their performance is already so basic. As far as how long they last, we were very surprised here. They do worse than we expected, landing near the bottom of the graph. Normally, we expect lower-powered processors to be at the top. 9.5 to 10 hours is not bad, but considering this test is just basic office tasks, in the real world, we would expect it to die at least an hour or two sooner. Just as a point of reference, the Dell XPS 14 with the same CPU lasts 17 hours. For the speakers, both the Dell 14S and 16S sound a bit muddied with not very much bass. Unfortunately, they just don't have the same expansive soundstage that we get on the XPSs. This is how the 1080p webcam looks and sounds on the Dell 14S. It does have IR for Windows Hello, it does not have a privacy shutter, and this is in studio lighting. I think it looks pretty good. Here's how the 16S looks also in studio lighting. I think it looks about the same, and please note that both do have noise cancellation on their mics. Here's the 14S again in house lights, just normal overhead fluorescent lighting. It does have to compensate for the lower lighting, so it ends up looking a little grainier. Same for the 16S here, it also looks a little grainier in this lower lighting. When it comes to upgradability, these laptops seem to use the same basic guts. Both seem to have the same motherboard and the same single-fan cooling solution, which reinforces that these are not performance laptops. Battery size is the same, both only have a single upgradable SSD. Unfortunately, when we did try to do an SSD swap, we were not able to get it working because it said that we had an incompatible NVMe version. This is not an error we've seen before, so we are contacting Dell and we will post an update down below. The Wi-Fi card is replaceable and does support the full Wi-Fi 7 spec. For Linux, we initially tried to do an SSD swap with Ubuntu 26, but it actually didn't work because the SSD wasn't verified. Instead, we had to use the USB, and when we did that, only the speakers and the microphone didn't seem to work, but with a proper update, they probably would. So which Dell S is worth buying? Let's talk about the configurations available. We don't really like the 14S and its poor display options, so we feel it'd have to be on a pretty steep discount to be considered. HP has more to offer around the $1,000 price point. Their OmniBook X offers similar value to the Dell S, but is generally cheaper. I even noticed the OmniBook Ultra, which is more premium and better than the Dell S, for around the same price as it. The 16S has a couple more compelling configs, especially while I'm writing this video, and they are all around $300 off. I actually really like the lowest end config on Dell's page right now of the 16S. No frills performance with all the nice features of the laptop and a bright, high-resolution screen option for only $1,100. That's really not bad for how premium this laptop is, as long as you're okay with it being heavy. I'll link it down below. You could also splurge for the 2.8K OLED screen on a custom config with that CPU, but I don't feel it's worth the extra $600 they're charging. Plus, the custom configurations are pretty wonky. You're often locked into specific colors or screens if you want a certain CPU, for example. Plus, when you start adding things, you start to creep into the pricing of better laptops. Something like the Acer Swift has a nice screen too, weighs much less, and performs much better with its X7 chip. We'll link the Acer and a bunch of other recommendations below this video, and of course on our website, bestlaptop.deals. Over there, you'll notice we gave the Dell S's a score of around 3.5 stars. Could be better, could be worse. I hope we've helped you make a buying decision today, and I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. I will catch you later.